All right, this is my 59th take. Hey everyone, my name is Nathan. I am a cloud security engineer. I have been doing this for more than a year, but I like to think that I know what I'm talking about. Hopefully, right? Today I want to talk about Route 53 Resolver DNS firewall, how to configure it, how to deploy it, right? Now, keep in mind that this is my personal experience, is not official guideline. So please go read that documentation from AWS, right? Because by the time that I upload this video, things might have changed or I could have gotten something wrong, right? Feel free to leave any feedback. I would really appreciate it. All right, let's get to it. Now, some people say route, some people say root. I think both are correct, but I'm gonna go with route. Okay. So Route 53 Resolve DNS firewall. Some of you are probably asking yourself right now, what is he even talking about? And it's totally understandable. I feel the same way whenever I encounter a new concept, not just in cloud or security, but in anything, right? But I think uh, the way that you learn new thing is to actually do it, right? My favorite quote is from Grandmaster Yoda. He said, "Do or do not. There's no try." All right, so let's get back to the topic here. Now, before we talk about DNS firewall, I think we need to talk about the default DNS server in all Amazon VPC, that is Route 53 Resolver, right? Its job is to respond to DNS query from AWS resources within a VPC. And here is a simplified diagram of how that works. It's not exactly how that works. I think it's the A step in a DNS lookup. But the basic idea is that your resource within a VPC will send a DNS query to Route 53 resolver, and then the resolver will return with it will do its things and return the IP address to resource. So the resource and the domain can communicate based on the IP address, right? And this is where the DNS firewall comes in. Depending on your approach, you can either do a blockless approach or an allowless approach. So within the DNS firewall, there's a domain list. There could be multiple domain lists, but let's just take one for example. So the DNS query from the resource, we will have to go through the DNS firewall for inspection first. Now, is the domain within the DNS query match in a blockless approach? If it matches a domain list, it will get blocks. Everything else will be allowed to go through. Vice versa, in an allowless approach, everything matched the allowless will be allowed to go through, and everything else will be blocked, right? So the question now is, why do I have to pay more money for DNS firewall when DNS query is already free? And why do I want to create more work for myself when I'm already so busy, right? I say that there are two use cases that you want to consider to use DNS firewall. The first use case is to prevent DNS exfiltration. What is DNS exfiltration? So let's presume that someone got access into your resource within your VPC, and now they want to extract the data without being detected. One of the ways that they can do it is to pack the data or piece of the data in a DNS query and send the query to a domain that they own. So on the outside, it will look just like regular DNS traffic, and after the DNS query goes out to the domain, and then they can compile the packet, they will have the complete set of data undetected. So that's the first use case, and I think that's the most popular one. Now the second use case, unless you're a dictator and you want to have total control of your environment, I would say why, right? So this approach is, or the allowless approach, ordinarily called the walled garden approach, in which the users, or in this case the resource, only have access to a specified list of domain and nothing else. Now I don't know how you're going to make that work, but you do you, right? Just keep in mind that dictatorship don't last for long. Okay. Now, how do we configure this? I think you need to understand the components before you configure this thing. From my perspective, there's three basic components. Is there a domain list, a rule, and a root group, right? A domain list is just a list or collection of domain, and then later you will use it for DNS filtering. You can call it a block list or an allow list. The action itself is not taken here. It will be taken based on the setting of a rule. The rule is the filter itself, right? It will point into a domain list and the action when a domain match that domain list. But the rule itself doesn't exist. It has to be part of a root group. A root group is a collection of DNS firewall rules, and it's actually the component that will be associated with a VPC, right? We will go into a more detailed looks here. Okay, so this is what domain lists look like in AWS console, right? You can go to DNS firewall either through VPC or through Route 53 resolver DNS firewall. Okay, now AWS already provided you with two managed domain lists. One is for botnet command control and one for malware. Okay, it's free, so please take advantage of it. Okay, you can also run your own custom domain list. Here I'm using Recorder Fusion domain risk list. Okay, let's see. I think we can go deeper here. Okay, let's see what the custom domain list look like. You can click here to add domain, and here you have two options. One is to type each domain per line, or you can do a bulk load by pointing it to a text file into in an S3 bucket. Okay. The limit for the domain, I think, is 100,000 by default. Also, what else? Okay. Cost. It will cost you 0.0005 per domain per month, but then DNS firewall is a regional service, so you would have to do it for every single region that you're using, right? So let's say you have 100,000 domain, that's $50 per month per region. And as I said earlier, you have two options. You can either populate the domain list via the console by type it per line or point to text file, or you can do it to API call import firewall domains. Now keep in mind that the default limit for the text file is 100,000 domain as of this moment. I think initially they launched it with 30,000, and we were one of the first people to use this service, and we immediately request to have it raised to 100,000, and now it's a default value. And you can also request it for a quota increase. Okay, now we look at the second and the third component. And as I mentioned earlier, a rule has to be a part of a root group. Here you see three rules in accordance to the domain list that we have. So this one, the malware rule for the malware domain list. This is for the command control, and this is for the custom domain list. And so each rule will have a specified domain list and the action they should take when it's matched, when the domain and the query match the domain list, right? And then you can also see the priority. The DNS firewall will evaluate the rule with the smaller numeric value in priority first. Then if it's executed based on that rule already, it will skip looking at the other two, right? Here we can look at how to add a rule. Basically, you pick either the managed domain list or the custom domain list, and then the action. For the block action, you will have some extra response option here, either no data and next domain, or you can create your own custom response. Okay. Now, that's how we configure it, right? With the domain list, we create domain list, we create a root group, and then we create the rule within the root group to point to the domain list that we created or the managed domain list. Okay. Now we have the root group. What else do we do? So there are three options for deployment, which I say are dependent on your organization side. Either you have one account, more than one account, or you have a whole bunch of accounts using AWS organization, right? So the first approach is to just go into your root group and click Associate VPC, right? This is a manual process. So I would say it's doable if you have a single account, because you have to go into every single region and do this. It's manual. Well, you can also do it through API, but it's cumbersome. Now the second option you have, if you have more than one account, is to use Resource Access Manager, or RAM, to share the root group. Okay. This is how you share the root group. You go to Resource Access Manager, and then I think when you create these share resource, you can pick the DNS firewall root group, and then you just share it to whichever account that you have or you would like to share it to. It's called a share principal. And then later when you go into that account, you will see the root group there. So this will help you. So you don't have to create a domain list in every single account. You just need to create in one account and share the root group to the other account. That saves you some money, and it is also easier to deploy, right? But still, you still have to go into each region in every account to associate a VPC. That's still a lot of work. Okay. So the last option, and I would also say that is the best option, is to use AWS Firewall Manager. Okay, after you create a firewall manager policy for DNS firewall. Okay, it will automatically onboard new account in your organization, or offboard account that you remove from your organization, and it will apply the DNS firewall root group into all VPC automatically. You don't have to leave a finger. That's the best part, right? Also, because Firewall Manager use AWS Config to monitor the compliance, you can go into Firewall Manager and go into that policy, and you can look at the compliance of all the account within your policy scope, right? And then you can go deeper, and then you can see which VPC that is not associated with the root group that you set up, right? It's very convenient. Even though that costs a bit more money, it's $100 per policy per region. I forgot that it's per month or something. I forgot the frequency of this. But yeah, you can look it up after. Also, the cost of the AWS config rules that's set up to monitor the compliance. Not sure how much that costs. But, you need AWS config to be turned on for this to work. And I think this is the best option you have. Okay, last but not least, login. Unlike WAF, where you can configure centralized login within the firewall manager policy, here with DNS query login, you have to manually create a login configuration in every single region manually by going to Route 53 resolver query login. Then you create a query login configuration. The destination of the logs can be an S3 bucket, or a CloudWatch log, or Kinetic Data Firehose, I think, yeah. And then similar to what you have to do with the root group, you have to add VPC into the login configuration. And then you can also share the configuration with other account, right? So the log will look like this, with the account ID, the region, the VPC ID, the domain name that is requested, the action that if it involve firewall, then you have the action, the root group ID, the domain list ID, the instance ID, where the request coming from, the IP address. Okay, see what else did I miss? Okay, I also have a little helper script, So after you share the configuration to all the other accounts to set up a centralized login solution, people in this account have to go into the the region and then add the VPC to the login configuration, and it's too manual. I have the script will actually loop into older region and automatically add the VPC to the login configuration, so you don't have to do anything. I will put the link in the description. All right. What else do I have? Okay, some extra note on the login. Now, whichever account that create the login configuration, the log will be stored under that account. That's not how I should phrase it. So if you choose S3 as the destination for the logs, and this is the bucket name, right? And then the next substructure folder is AWS logs, and then it will be the account which is the owner of the login configuration. It doesn't matter who you share with, it will all go under this owner account. And then it will be this VPC DNS query logs. And then the log will be separate by VPC ID, not by account ID. That's just something you want to pay attention to when you look up the logs later. Okay. The second thing that I want you to know is when you set up the login configuration and you put the S3 bucket as the destination. Assume that you want to store all logs in a single bucket. If you set this up in a different region than the S3 bucket, you will probably see this error and you can just ignore it. It will still work just as fine. I think it has something to do with the format of the S3 UI here. But you're supposed to put the region code like US is one or whatever that's your bucket created in, but then this input box doesn't allow you to put in that format. But it still works. You just type in the bucket name. It should work. I don't know if they fixed it yet. All right. Next is some extra note on this whole thing. Now we ran into some issue with with an account that we have. Apparently, if you look at the cost down here, the DNS firewall query cost them more than $300 per day. That is really expensive. How does that happen? So the cost for DNS query to go through the DNS firewall is 60 cents per million queries. So in this case, they are having cost of $300 per day. That's a 500 million query per day, and that's not how things should work. Okay. So what I want to say is that when you deploy DNS firewall, you might want to monitor the cost, just in case you have some ridiculous chatty resource within your AWS account, right? So that here we have more than 7 days of ridiculous costing, right? Keep in mind, DNS firewall doesn't take break during the weekend. That's why you need to, if it's the whole week that you haven't looked at it, it's 7 days, and 7 days like $2,100 gone already. AWS will probably refund that money for you, but you don't want to go through the hassle. Okay. Another note, here's something you need to check for every single VPC. Now, in case that the DNS firewall is failing or unresponsive, you would need to configure whether you want the DNS query to go through in that case. Usually I would say that you need to enable this setting so that if DNS firewall is failing, your environment is still working as normal, even though it's losing the protection of DNS firewall, but it's not breaking anything, right? Now, if you have the dictatorship going, as I mentioned earlier, then you might want to turn this off, So if the firewall is burning down and you want to shut up your whole environment, okay? All right, here are some more advanced stuff. This is based on, part of it is based, This is based on part of Synthetic Sum from Jonathan Raw. Yeah, I will put the link into his repo in the description. You guys should definitely take a look. The basic idea is that we create our own domain list by pulling domain risk list from MISP, an open source threat intelligence platform, and also from Recorded Future, the commercial threat intelligence platform. We pull it to a DynamoDB table for deduplication and also for TTL management. Then we will scan the table, write a text file into the S3 bucket, and then DNS firewall will pull that text file to create the domain list. Okay, this is a better view of it, right? So the domain IOC or indicator of compromise is written into this table in DynamoDB, right? Then we scan the table, we write it to a text file, and put in S3 bucket. DNS firewall will scan that file. Well, Cobio is doing it, calling the API to create a domain list, okay? And then we're using File Manager to deploy firewall, the DNS firewall root group to every single VPC. And this threat intelligence collection is run like every 4 hours, so it's always keeping the domain list fresh. It's just some advanced stuff that you want to consider. And I think that's the end of my presentation. Feel free to leave any feedback. Thank you for listening to this. All right. I see you guys on the next one. Peace.